are a communist and, super interested to learn from you. So give us a little bit about your background, whatever you feel comfortable sharing with, and we'll just kind of get into it, man. It's an open conversation. We don't have any specific questions planned or anything like that. So,
Cool. Well, thank you guys for having me. My name is Miguel. I live in Dallas, Texas, but I'm from Sulphur Springs, Texas. So Texas, the whole way, born and raised.
yeah, I got the
Um,
big wooden Texas up here behind me. I'm a
yes.
new Texan though. I just got down here in April, man.
Oh, no way. Where are you
Yeah.
from?
Well, I lived in Cleveland, Ohio for 25 years, and I was raised on the East Coast. So I lived in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Delaware, and upstate New York a little bit before I made it to Ohio.
All right.
And
That's
then
really
Josh
cool.
Josh is a Michigan guy. Boo.
Metro Detroit.
Okay, okay. But yeah, I when I was raised, I was from the Central Baptist Church in my hometown. I planned on attending Criswell College. When I turned 18, but you know, things change. You learn, you grow, and I decided that I didn't want to be a part of the church anymore. And then got into a little bit of trouble, whatever, and started working in kitchens, and that's where I've landed, and that's where I'm at. And I've been in Dallas the last 10 years cooking, and politically, as I feel, especially as I left the church, get introduced to different people, different ideas, and that's when I first started to see it was more liberal stuff at first. And then I found that liberals were all talk and no action. So I decided, let's start reading, let's start looking. And I saw a bunch of great anarchists from the past, especially America's history of anarchy
Mm-hmm.
and of the anarchist movement. And but then I saw that that's not strong enough. Some of the problems that we have in this world, it's not strong enough to rely on pockets of groups or individuals. You need something like a big hammer to really get at this problem. And that's when I started reading, more Marxist literature and becoming impressed and inspired by the actions, the motivations, the results of Marxist revolutions. And so then in my search for, comrades, I find here in Dallas the Party for Socialism and Liberation. So that's who I'm with currently.
Gotcha. So thank you for sharing all that. Real quick too, like the church. So Josh and I talk about this a lot. So we consider ourselves spiritual people. But we do not subscribe to a specific religion. And people get confused by that because I wear a crucifix, I have a crucifix tattoo, and I, in some ways, consider myself a follower of Christ, but I don't really follow, I don't consider myself a Christian formally because I read the Bible and there's this big theme of love, right? But there's also a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense, that doesn't align with love. So I'm like, I'm not into this. Plus, when I was a kid, so I'll be 38 in December. And, when I was a kid, all the shit about the Catholic Church was coming out with, that stuff. So I'm like, well, I'm a little boy. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this. So, like I had a falling out with the church from that matter. But was there anything specifically that you were like, this just isn't for me?
Like when even when I was in the church, let me back up. When I was really, really young, Brother Kenneth came to the door, he knocked on the door, he said, "Hey, y'all should come to church." My dad was like, "Y'all want to go?" And we said, "Yeah." So we go and we get our Bibles and we go weekly. And as I grow up in the church, I'm actually reading it. I'm actually looking at the stuff. And I'm looking around, I'm like, nobody cares. This is sort of just like a hangout. Um, and so I tried to get really involved. And like I said, I wanted to go to like a seminary, when I graduated. But it was that how do I say this? The way they were behaving, what they were doing, it's a social group. It's like an institution of the community. It's not necessarily anything to do with the Bible or Jesus. And a lot of times it hasn't been. people just make up stuff, but the church goes on. Like Gwen Shamblin, for example, just random stuff like that. But you know, I find a lot of amazing things in the Bible, but not so many in the church. You know.
That you do. That's exactly how I feel. Like I'm reading it and I'm like, this makes sense to me because you can interpret it many different ways. It's very confusing at first if you're
Mm-hmm.
not open minded about it. Like speaking in parably, I can't even say that word. And it's like, what is this? But then I've connected with one of my old high school teachers, and he's become like my spiritual coach. And he and I like talk through the Bible verses and everything we say. And I disagree with him sometimes, right? I'm like, so God's gonna not let me in heaven because I chose to use this word instead of that word. I'm like, really? Like we're like God plays like semantics here? Like that doesn't make sense. Um,
Right.
yeah. So no, thank you for sharing that. So and then you brought up something else. So you started reading Marxist,
I
material.
want to
Go ahead.
one second.
Yeah.
I want to go back first though.
We're gonna
It's
need 2 sessions, I guarantee you.
yeah. So as far as being in the Baptist church, when I hear Baptist church, I think of a lot of conservatives. So from a political cycle or process, if you will, in your life, were you surrounded by a bunch of conservatives? Were you indoctrinated into that way of thinking and have those anti-abortion and all that kind of stuff thoughts initially in your life? So I'm curious about learning about the progression from being in the church, leaving the church to getting around more liberal people, and then where you went from there. I'm very curious about that progression.
My dad was very old when he had me, so he was actually in the Vietnam War, and then when he got out, he was a police officer. So as far as like political, milieu or whatever, I grew up watching Glenn Beck and
Yeah.
Bill O'Reilly with him on the couch. And in the church, I was as radical as you could be. I mean, I was Calvinist. I was like very obsessed with like the very dark parts of the Bible sometimes. Um, and yeah, I mean, I was like borderline Mennonite, like I was like, women should wear full head to toe burqa type stuff.
Man, so
Um,
you've done a complete 180, it sounds like. All right, all
but
right.
it took like, oof, 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
So when you were having those thoughts and going down that path, did you feel aligned? Did it feel forced? Did you feel like something just wasn't connecting, or were you all in when you were in that thought process?
Oh yeah. I mean, I took it for granted when people tell you as a little like a 7-year old, all these things. And so by the time I'm like 14 or something, I take it seriously and I'm like, you're going to go to hell. I'm like in chemistry class, walking people through like the way of the master thing from, I don't know if y'all familiar. But it's like a way of like evangelizing. But yeah, I was all in. I thought I went to every church camp. I was at church 4 times a week. I was in the choir, in the band, in the whatever. Like I did anything and everything. I had a falling out because I was like, you guys aren't doing it right. Um, and then I started a little group with me, my brother, some friends. Um, and then I was like, I'll go to college and I'll really learn. And when I graduated and I could step away from it, and I think also getting the internet, because I got the internet very late, like when I was 17, and started talking to individuals who weren't just around me in the church all the time. Like, oh, watch this video about evolution. Watch this about, the Big Bang. Like, it seems like you just don't understand it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, actually. Uh, so just being able to like have access to these ideas, I guess, was what really helped.
Would you say, because like this is something else that Josh and I talk about regularly, that kind of in society, right? Like as kids, we're very, very curious, and curiosity is at its core like how you learn, right? You're curious about something, so you go out and you learn about it. Did curiosity fuel that transition? Because it seemed like you were a curious person. If you were like, hey, yeah, I'm going to listen about this, about the Big Bang Theory, would you say like curiosity, like what was at its core caused you to question things and transition and start to change your beliefs? Because I think that's super important for people, because a lot of people are stuck in this fixed mindset where things are just the way that they are. But if you question things and open your eyes, I think more people would realize that that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of different options and ways to go with your life and many other things. So could you kind of walk us through that? Like what made you start questioning things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a follow up to that once you're done.
Uh, you know, I always thought that what I believe should be so rock solid, you can't break it. So bring it on. You say that this thing disproves what I believe. I'll watch it and I'll make sure that what I believe is true. And at some point, I didn't have good answers, but they did. They had really solid answers for biology and stuff like that, and I was kind of just kind of versed in the Bible. It wasn't good enough for me. At some point you have to listen to people who've spent their entire lives digging into this answer. And I met a bunch of Christians as well, because I was like hardcore young Earth creationist, stuff like that. I met a bunch of other Christians as well who were like, no, maybe it's not as literal as they say, and that was also in itself a stepping stone.
I think that's
That's interesting because it seems like where we are from a social media standpoint, just generalizing, people dig in their heels and there's no taking anybody off of their thoughts, and so there's the lack of curiosity now and maybe social media isn't a good example to use because I feel like you're not in person, you're not one-on-one, and people have this defensiveness almost on social media, and they feel like they've got kind of nothing to lose. Like, who gives a shit if
they're not afraid to get punched in the mouth anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we have all these stock answers of calling and labels of calling things misinformation, calling them disinformation, calling them cult members, calling people like names, and segregating people into silos of what's wrong in society. And so I feel like we've got these structures in place now where it just causes us to be able to label people rather than just remove all the labels and just say, I'm curious about this other side. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe not wrong is the bad word to use. Maybe I'm not thinking of something outside of the beliefs that I've always had in my life.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it right now, Miguel. So, like, obviously, when you had initially engaged with us, I'm assuming, because I don't remember, but it was probably on some bullshit fucking Trump post or something like that. And
I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but that's what most of the engagement gets. But
Yeah.
it was like, and now, so Josh and I are very anti two-party system. Like, I think the two-party system is completely flawed and it is not serving America anymore. And I was a huge RFK guy. Like, I'm fucking on board with RFK. And then when he dropped out of the race and decided to endorse Trump and now he's working with him, that's when I made that pivot and I got sucked back into the two-party system is what I mean. And now I realized it and I'm like, whoa, like, what am I doing here? Like, I'm going against my beliefs, my values by causing more division, more labeling, more all of this stuff. And I stopped it and made a transition and a pivot on our social media content again, back to aligning more with what I started about. And people are just, I mean, we got a phone call from a guy the other day, like just losing his mind and all this stuff. And I'm getting in the comment section, you're just a fucking Trumper. I'm like, no, I'm open and I'm thinking logically and I can make changes and I can like, you're so stuck in your belief that you can't understand that other people can make pivots and changes in their lives and their viewpoints and their values and all this stuff. So it's just a crazy place. But as I always do, I've gotten us off topic. So sorry.
Just going back to my follow-up question. I'm curious from Miguel's standpoint, the initial following of the church and conservative views, did you feel like that was more like, look, there's no judgment in what I'm about to say. I would hope you wouldn't take it that way anyways, but as kids, we're so impressionable and we want to impress those around us, and especially parents and, you know, those that we look up to. And I'm sure there were a lot of them within the church. And so it's easy for me to believe that a child might pursue like a conservative viewpoint just to impress those around them, just to fit in, just to show that they're connected with the people that they look up to in their lives. And so I'm curious if there was any of that in your life, and that's what kind of kicked all this off.
Yeah. And you know, I maybe even a step further, like, oh, you think that? I'll do you one worse. You know, I think they're all going to hell. You know, something like that. You know, and I don't know. At some point, I didn't like myself. There was something very hateful in me growing. That was also like, you know, and that, I don't think that's necessarily like at the core of conservatism or anything, but I found a lot of, like you were saying, you know, respect, I guess, from people I looked up to by doubling down, tripling down. You know, my youth pastor tried to run over a squirrel and enjoyed that kind of thing. You know, just little tiny acts of, and then, you know, cumulatively, you know, you become like the Westboro Baptist Church. You know.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, from my own personal standpoint, I grew up Catholic, and I was forced to go to Catholic schools from preschool through 12th grade, and I never became indoctrinated. I was always resistant, and I feel like I was even resistant to a fault, in that it was like instead of wanting to fit in and wanting to impress those around me that I looked up to, that believed in Catholicism and the Bible and all that kind of stuff, I went the exact opposite, and was defiant to a point of harming myself. And like those things that I probably should have agreed with, I just defied because somebody else told me that I needed to believe in it. I'm like, no, fuck that. I'm not going to believe it because you said that I'm going to. I'm going to do the opposite. And so like the Bible, I still can't get into the Bible because it's like, it's somebody telling me how I should live, or at least that's the way people have interpreted the Bible as being active in their lives. Of this is kind of like a viewpoint of, you know, lessons and stories on how people should live their lives. So it's like, no, but I'm going to make my own rules. I'm going to follow my own thing. Like, I can listen to these conversations, but I would never just internalize it as like the answer, which some people do on how you should live your life.
Which is funny is now that I think about it, what you were saying. So Miguel, defiantly human, part of the name came from Josh's desire to always defy everything. And you're saying that, Josh, I'm like, Jesus was defiant as fuck.
Yeah.
Dude, that's what he
exactly.
defied the entire system, the entire, you know, religious system at that point in time, and ultimately got him killed. But, you know, yeah, so anyway, so back to now, you've made that pivot, you've graduated high school, you started learning, you know, the Big Bang Theory, all of these, you know, evolutionary perspectives. So we're there, and now you're pivoting further away from, you know, that hardcore Baptist conservative type beliefs to something different. So kind of pick up there.
Yeah, I voted for Gary Johnson.
So did I.
That was the first person I ever voted for. And then I didn't vote the next election because I wasn't registered in Dallas. And yeah, it was kind of like at that time, it was like, you know, I'm libertarian, you know, like I don't believe in government stuff, and I just want people to smoke weed and get married and blah, 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 blah. I thought that less closely aligned to, you know, my sort of laissez-faire attitude about life in general. Let people do acid. Who cares? What do you know? What Ron Paul was saying made a lot of sense. You know, he's standing next to these crazy assholes, honestly, and he's kind of just saying normal stuff. Like, why are we blowing up places for no reason? Why are we, you know, of course, people wouldn't do heroin. You know,
logic doesn't belong in politics. That's crazy.
No, it's a good show. It's a very good show. There's actually a Lenin quote that I love a lot, which is the two major parties are good at staging spectacular battles, but they're in fact one giant party, you know.
I
And
agree with that
they
completely.
Yeah,
never
I agree.
disagree when things really matter. They don't disagree, you know.
Dude, we were just talking about that, man. Like literally, if you just don't put a label on anything, right? If I bring up the Patriot Act or uh, corporate lobbying or what's the other one? Oh my God, I lost the name of it. It was the conservatives did it, but oh my God, I can't think of the name of it. But any of these huge topics where it's like, hey, if we fix some of this stuff, we can actually start turning our country around. Most people are like, hell yeah, like that's you're fucking right, like blah blah. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as you say Trump or Kamala or liberal or conservative or Republican or Democrat, it just dissolves into total fucking chaos. And it's like, you guys, like if you would just fucking wake up for a second and stop labeling each other, we could like maybe make some progress on this. So, but again, anyway, so and people would even just be turned off by the fact that you just quoted Lenin, right?
Yeah,
Like they
Yeah.
would they would be like, no, that's fucking terrible. He's a terrible
impossible.
person, right? Like most people are gonna say that. And a buddy of mine told me the other day he can't stand Elon Musk, right? He's like, I hate his political views, like I just don't like him as a person. He's like, but that guy is going to be the world's first trillionaire. So to say that I can't learn from something from him from a business perspective is crazy. And if you would just realize every single person that you interact with, you can learn something from them, even if you disagree with them or even hate them wholeheartedly. Like Hitler was a really shitty guy, but he also got millions of people to believe in this fucking crazy ideology. So he had some sort of persuasive power that maybe you could apply a little bit of that to your own life if you're a public speaker or something. I don't know. Like, and I'm not saying that you should listen to Hitler, but you know what I mean.
Yes, yeah. There's powerful lessons wherever you look. You have to be aware, you know, and not sucked into whatever narrative just so happens to exist. There's a lot of stuff in my life that really I feel gels with what you're saying with like the defiantly human, like and what you're saying about the just there was a certain point in my life where I was like, you know what, let's maybe just start from scratch. Um, and I did, like you were saying, I threw the baby out with the bathwater a little bit, where I should have maybe paid
Yeah.
attention. But that's part of the human process. You know, we're not robotic, and it's something that I really think that communism actually like has been about for a long time, but people don't know in America. You know, when you actually read communists and stuff like that, it's about like the freedom to live your life without being under the yoke of some employer. You know, basically, to ultimately do away with government. You know, at some point, to not have these like really rigid structures, these class structures that you're forced, you know, by nature, the nature of your society to perform, to behave in a certain way. You know, the freedom, for example, like Che Guevara. When you read what he's writing, he goes on for hundreds of pages about, you know, the love he has for these people. He's taking a motorcycle toward, around South America, and he's saying that he sees all this death, this destruction, this exploitation, the suffering the people, and he says, "Oh, I could be a doctor and, you know, fix the problems that exist, or I could do something more and prevent further problems from existing." And what's interesting to me is that the legacy that he leaves behind is Cuba has the highest doctor per capita of all countries in all the world.
Does it
It's
really? I would have never guessed that. I had no idea.
and it's directly because, you know, of Che and, you know, Fidel, because that was one of the key problems in their societies, that they just didn't have basic access to healthcare, and it was being kept from them by people, you know, who were in positions of power. And that's what communism really strikes at, is like this defiance, this rebellion against, you know, the status quo, the sort of yoke of the ruling class.
It's interesting that you bring that up too, because that's something else that it might have been you that brought it up in a conversation through the chat or something like that, or maybe it was somebody else. And I've gotten it multiple times, but you hear this argument in the United States. Well, tell me where socialism has actually worked, right? Like, give me a country. So obviously, different. Not, I'm not, socialism, communism, but people are like it's a good argument. They're like, well, the US government hasn't really allowed it to work anywhere, right? In its true form, because we go in and the CIA and look at what we did with Venezuela and all this shit.
Which
So
why do we give a shit
it's because, well,
what
I
other
think
countries are doing from a communism standpoint? Just
I
leave them
think
alone.
I think it's a threat to the capitalistic system in the United States, and they're worried about that. And then they say that it's in the name of democracy. And here's what I think it is, and that is my point with what I just said. It always, whether it's communism, socialism, capitalism, whatever other fucking economic system out there exists, it always comes back to people. People fuck it up. You can have whatever, you could have the perfect system in place, and people are going to fuck it up because they are greedy and they suck. I don't think, I don't know much about socialism or communism, to be very clear and honest, but I think it all comes down to like it's not I don't know how it fucking works without people
Mm.
fucking it up. And I think the best examples of it probably in my understanding are Scandinavia. Like Finland, Denmark,
Mm.
like those countries have a level of socialism, but it's not in its pure form. Same thing, we don't have real capitalism in the United States. Like we don't have a free market. Like this isn't actually capitalism. Our government is too involved
Mm.
in everything that we fucking do. So that's very interesting though what you just said. I was like, damn, like, because you're talking about this shit, and again, if you don't put a label on it, if you were like, hey, it's just me, you, and Josh having a conversation. We didn't say anything about communism, and you just said some of the things that you said. Most people would be like, "Fuck yeah!" Like this sounds great. You know what I mean? But there's a label put on it, so they don't even listen to it. And it's like, how do you know? Just like you said before with the Big Bang Theory and all this stuff. How do I know that my beliefs are absolutely 100% correct if I can't even listen to other fucking options, right? It's just
Yeah.
confirmation bias at that point. So yeah,
Yes.
yeah, dude. What you just said, it just made me think of all that stuff. It was great.
So when I think of communism, and I could be completely wrong, I think of actually bigger government, because when I think of corporations and industries and systems and all that kind of stuff, I think of it all being under governmental control. So I'm curious if I'm off on that, and if so, but well, regardless if I'm off on that or not, I'm curious about like the details. How, from a detailed standpoint, like how would that work? How would communism work in a society in the United States? Like we scrap the complete system that we have right now. How would it work in our country?
Rebuild our
Oh man.
country, Miguel. We want to know.
Yeah. You had the. Can you repeat the first question? Because I know the answer to the second one. The first question was.
When I think of communism, I think of
Oh,
bigger government.
yes. Okay. So Richard Wolff has a great. He's great for a lot of this stuff. Richard Wolff, two Fs. He's an economics professor. He's a Marxist. He breaks it down pretty easy. But basically, it's like communism isn't just when the government does stuff. Communism is a sort of aspirational goal that we achieve through socialism, and socialism is a process, by which we sort of start to take away some of the power of capital and replace it with the power of society, people. So, just off the rip, the party and part of our platform is to seize the top 100 companies. So yes, it does sound like big government. Okay. But the idea is if we start to remove some of the power of private capitalist oligarchs and replace it with the power of people, then people get to benefit more. It's very simple. It's truly that easy. For example, my job. I work in the kitchen. We throw away food all the time. I mean, you would not believe how much food we throw away. and yet I see hungry people every single day. I live in Dallas. If our company was collectively owned and all of the employees looked at all of the waste that we had and we could all decide on what to do with it, I'm sure the answer wouldn't just be throw it away. I'm sure at least the first answer would be let's eat it, because we're not even allowed to eat it. We have to pay for it. That's crazy. The second answer would probably be let's figure out a way to give some of this stuff to people who can eat it, you know? And in the same way, the profit incentive. That's really what's at the core here. The profit incentive is what's driving each business to throw this food away. But it's the individual. It's the guy at the top or a group of people at the top who are saying, I want my wallet to be as fat as possible.
So their
And at
belief,
some
so just to make sure that I understand what you just said there, the belief is that if I give the food away, that, well, I get it to the employees because you're selling it to the employees, right? But if I give it away to people that are in need, then they're going to be decentivized from coming in to buy my food, even though they don't have the fucking money to buy it in the first place. It doesn't.
potentially, but it's also just that you have to like spend time. Somebody has to like
Yeah,
organize the
you got to
waste,
pay
get it
somebody.
someplace. Yeah.
God
There's just
forbid
no
that we're good people.
yeah, yeah. And in China, there is a fine for food waste. So, how do we balance? I understand the issue of thinking, the government is over here. I'm not a part of it. It's the biggest enemy on the planet if it's my enemy, for sure. But on the other hand, we're throwing away billions of tons of food. It's
Yeah.
crazy how
Yeah,
which is the bigger crime in my mind. And that's part of the balance that I think that people would make if given a choice, which is why there's so much anti-communist propaganda. I think there's so much time spent. The Department of Defense made sure that every bad guy was Russian for 50 years, so that when we grew up, we could not even have the conversation about
yeah.
how they really live in their world. And so this is part of my party's beliefs, is that we think most people actually do like socialism, and we think that if we make concerted efforts to like invite them and uh, help people when we can, that socialism can win and people will benefit.
Well, my point, like my question that I've been asking myself a lot lately is, so we live in a society, and I'm talking about globally at this point in time,
Mm,
in developed countries where we have all of this technology, we have brilliant minds, we have minds like Elon Musk and Bill Gates and whoever, these geniuses. How have we not figured out to like take all of the really good parts of these different or economic systems and make something that's new and
mm.
that works? Can't we figure something out at this point in time that kind of like has the best parts of everything? And then maybe that's not, maybe it's a bit ideological and maybe my head's up in the clouds, but when we think that way, that's where innovation comes from, and we can.
Dare to dream.
What's that?
Dare to dream.
Dare to dream, right? Fucking dare to
But
dream. Like, why
but
can't I go out and make $100 million and people don't have to fucking die in the streets from opioid use and live in their own piss? Like, you go to fucking Austin and you see people screaming at buildings and living in the street and passed out, and it's just like this shit makes me sad as fuck. And like, can't we do better? Like, can't we do better?
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like any other system wouldn't suit them.
Yeah,
The
that's
oligarchs,
exactly it.
right?
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
The
like the
elite.
people that you just listed out, like Elon and Bill Gates and
Yeah, like Billy, like fucking Elon Musk, like, and I respect the guy's fucking man. I'm reading a biography about Elon Musk right now, Miguel, and like
mm,
it's very very interesting, and I respect his relentless pursuit of what he thinks is possible. But this guy's about to be the first trillionaire. A trillion
mm,
fucking dollar. Who needs $1 trillion? What are you gonna do with $1 trillion? Like,
yeah.
I mean, you could solve a lot of the world's problems like that, but like, and I'm not anti-capitalism. Like, I don't want anybody to think that. Like, I believe that there are good parts of what we do, in a capitalistic society, but there's a lot of really bad stuff too, and it's just like I don't know. I don't fucking know. And I get overwhelmed a lot thinking about some of these things, right? Because it's like you're trying to solve the world's problems in your head, and so many people just aren't awake or open to listening. We have this very fixed mindset, and I think part of that is just human psychology and human evolution where like, well, I'm not good at this, so I'm not going to try, or this system doesn't work, so I'm not going to fix it. And it's very interesting to me, like in your mindset specifically is a very growth oriented mindset. It's like you were raised in the church and you were indoctrinated to a point from that perspective, and you opened your mind and you were able to change. And it's like if we could all just take that approach to life, we could start to actually figure some shit out. But it's like, how the fuck do we get people to listen?
Oh, there's a great book called How Minds Change.
Ooh,
You should probably pick
that's
that one up.
interesting.
Fantastic. How Minds Change. I don't remember the author. I feel bad. Um, but yeah,
That's okay. I'll be able to find it.
yeah.
So
Uh,
we got 10 minutes left. So
yeah.
Josh, did you have something to say there? Because like I want to
Well,
get this, and
I'm
then dude,
curious. I'm curious to have Miguel finish.
yeah.
What I mean, how from a detailed standpoint, how would this work in our society?
Oh, so yes, the second part. There's another book, if you'd like, the party published called Socialist Reconstruction in America. And we sort of take it part by part. Okay, so let's look at our economic system. For starters, we need to seize certain companies that are making horrendous decisions about the entire planet against our will. Most people do not want the infrastructure that we have. Most people do not want the transportation system that we have. But who does? The oligarchs. So step one, remove them from power. Okay. And then step two, now we move on to, our prison system, for example. We have, what is it, like 1% or 2% of like our whole population is in jail.
Yeah.
We have 1 million people who are incarcerated right now. That's not just manpower that's wasted. It's like in the sense of like they are caged, but it's also manpower wasted in the sense that we have to have multiple men watch them all the time.
Yeah.
Unleashing the power of groups of people who've been like systemically attacked. You have a person who gets kicked around by their landlord, basically. Their boss doesn't pay them enough. They get evicted from their place. They get one charge or whatever. Now all of a sudden, since they don't have a job, they violated their probation. Now they're in jail. They're in prison. So you have people who like truly just needed help, and now we just kick them around enough, and now we're wasting money watching them in a cage, or betting money on them fighting. But we have so many different sectors, for example, to work on, like in healthcare. A lot of doctors want to work on patients. That's all they want to do. But insurance companies don't let them do that. It comes back to the oligarchs. What about our military? We spend how many billions of dollars on our own military, but also billions of dollars to give weapons to other people, and all of this in the pursuit of total global hegemony. We cannot tolerate any dissent whatsoever. You have to be part of the World Bank. You have to take a terrible loan out of the IMF. You have to pay us back for the rest of your life. And if you ever rebel, then we will crush you. Like, for example, in Vietnam. Vietnam was a French colony. I mean, we went to fight for a French colony so that we could have a banh mi or something. Like, what even was the idea? Ho Chi Minh actually quotes the Declaration of Independence when he declares his independence from France, thinking that the Americans would be on his side. But of course we are only on the side of capital. There's you could go sector by sector, and that's what the book does in a lot more detail. But this is like, if you actually, for example, if you read like the Communist Manifesto, it's just a pamphlet he published saying, okay, we're communists, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. Now, this is our first steps towards what we want. And it was radical ideas like an income tax that was bracketed, things that are at his time radical, but today we take for granted because that's just how it is. And his, like I said, was just first steps, but we can continue this process, removing the power of capital from our military, from our healthcare system, from our transportation system, from our food distribution system, from the way that we produce clothes, the way that we get energy, the way that we, you know, any number of things. And when you look into a specific industry, it comes back to capital. That's what's going on here. Oh, it's capital. For example, The Jungle. Thomas Sinclair's The Jungle. He writes this long thing about the Chicago meatpacking industry, you know, and it's from the perspective of a worker. And you don't really see the big picture until the very end, but he walks you through every step of his life. I mean, the guy gets a terrible mortgage that he's never going to get out of, and he's probably going to get evicted from so they can resell the house. His street is so unpaved that his child dies in a flood. His wife is sexually assaulted by her boss, but when he fights for her honor, he gets thrown in prison. He's then blacklisted from normal jobs, so he has to go underground. And it's like, at every turn, what's the problem? Oh, there's some boss. There's some oligarch. There's someone who has connections with political power, you know. And this is actually one of the defining things about capitalism, is that in capitalism, everything's for sale, including the government. Hey, please, what do you want? I'll give you anything. You know, Mayor Eric Adams in New York, right this second, under charges for corruption. It's, I mean,
well, look
you
what
could
just
buy a
fucking
politician.
happened with Pelosi's husband. He sold
Yes.
$500,000 worth of stock, and then we sue or the DOJ sues Visa. It's like, come on, and nobody fucking does anything about it.
Yeah, the worst case scenario is the government asks for their cut with a fine. Hey, you broke the law. Where's my share? You know?
Damn, dude, I never thought about it that way.
So we ultimately are focused on this profit incentive. Like, we're trying to say, like, if we could remove the power of those modern day kings, the people could maybe walk a little bit more freely.
This isn't really a question, because this will get into an hour-long conversation. But one concern that I have under something like this in the U.S. is that if the U.S. owns the 100 largest corporations, I do not trust our government to handle that money well. I do not trust that they would be good stewards of that money.
Dude, we're only $35 trillion in debt, Josh. What makes you think they're irresponsible with money?
I can agree with a lot of things you're saying. I can see the logic in a lot of it. I do not trust our government to be honest enough, and I don't know. You know, there's all this propaganda out there of, you know, Cuba and Russia and other countries that have tried, or that are communist, and so I don't have a clear picture. I'm not taking what the government has told us, what those countries are like, and absorbing it and believing it. I just don't have a good picture on if those countries are better at being good stewards of that money that they have in their control and what they do with it. I just know that under no circumstances would I think that our country would be good stewards of that money. But so that's not really a question. It's just it's more of a statement.
I understand.
But then it makes me wonder. So years and years ago, I thought that I heard a statistic of something like in Russia, everybody gets $60,000 per year, something like that. Is that a staple of communism? Is that there's like a basic universal income that people get? And if so, is there a way to rise above that? Is there a way to make more than that? Or is everybody kind of capped out at a certain income that people receive?
Love that question.
You know, okay, it depends on who, where, and when. For Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, you know, really tiny little country who's just been pounded for, you know, centuries now. For him, one of his quotes is, "We have to choose between champagne for some and clean drinking water for everybody." You know, but for, you know, Rosa Luxemburg in 1920s Germany, she said, "We don't just want bread, we also want roses." You know, and it's not necessarily about income level or bracket. It's about like access to the good things of life. what do we have in life that is good? We like AC. We like to be able to, get around places and travel and like have time off and be with our family and stuff like that, and be able to eat and have clothes and all that stuff. The question is, how do you have access to that? Is it simply access based on whether or not your boss thinks that you deserve to pay your rent this month? Or is it just because you're a human who probably needs a place to sleep tonight out of the cold, and we have empty houses, so here is yours? So the question is not necessarily about income. It's about sort of access to these resources. Like, how do we allocate all this food that we're wasting? How do we make sure that all the shoes that we're producing get on people's feet? In our current system, it's simply about the exchange of money. It doesn't even, the shoes don't even have to be on somebody's feet. As long as you paid for them, you can do whatever you want with them, and to a degree, that's cool. You can collect some shoes, but to another degree, there's kids who need shoes. So we have to sort of like make sure everybody's good. And then at a certain point, we can start deciding, okay, well, the finer things in life, the very finest, the most rare things in life, how do we allocate those things?
Yeah,
And it's like,
that's where I'm at. Like it's like I believe, and this has changed over time, right? But I think as long as there's a way to move to continue to grow, right? Financially specifically is what I'm talking about, then I'm all for it. Like I agree. I don't think people should be fucking dying of starvation on the streets and then there's other people that have $1 trillion, right? But I also think there needs to be incentive and people need to be rewarded for ingenuity and being, hardworking and all of those type of things. And that's where I feel like there becomes this level of danger where at what point in time do we decentivize like being a productive member of society? You know what I mean?
yeah,
So that's
in China,
where I'm at.
they have more billionaires in China than anywhere in the world. Uh, the world's largest, most powerful communist country that it's ever been, they have more billionaires than anybody. Um, and Shanghai is an amazingly huge city, and Wuhan, and they have these gigantic, I mean, Beijing, like New York-sized cities all over the place, full of people who are millionaires and billionaires. It's just,
I have a question on that
please,
really quickly though. Now, this very well may be the U.S. propaganda that's funneling through my question, but it makes me wonder if those billionaires in China are essentially government appointed billionaires. Like the government has appointed very certain people to run industry to do to be able to do certain things that the average person isn't able to do.
I would
And
guess that like in every circumstance in life, there are privileged people and there are not so privileged people. So the degree to which privilege is a matter of government is probably something that you could talk about. But on the other hand, I think that with so many, they've got a billion people there, uh, and with such income inequality as they have, it's kind of interesting that only China's billionaires are looked at with scrutiny rather than America's or Europe's. America and Europe. I mean, we subsidize billionaires for billions. I mean, Elon Musk for his cars and for SpaceX. Working with NASA and all that stuff. And it's like that's great. We should have rockets. We should have electric cars and stuff like that. But at the same time, like you were saying, is at what point does it become just like a government appointee?
yeah,
That is interesting.
Well,
That is
I
a good
mean,
question.
there's even been cases where in the United States, fuck, I can't remember his name, and I can't remember I think it was like a hedge fund or it was a private investment firm or something like that. But what they were I don't remember the name of it, but they own a bunch of like the fast food restaurants, Subway,
Oh,
A&W, like all this stuff. And what they've basically done is they've subsidized their workers' pay through the welfare system, where they pay them
yeah.
so little that they have to go on welfare in order to survive. So they've basically become billionaires off of the government. It's crazy. I mean, like the
Mhm.
stuff that happens. So yeah, there's definitely flaws to obviously all of this. But dude, hey, this has been absolutely incredible. Like I had such a good time talking to you, and I would love to have a part 2 to this because I think we still have a lot to get into. And what I'll do next time too, like I gotta do better about reaching out prior to and making sure that we're all good on time and all that stuff. So we'll do that. I'm gonna send you the link. We'll have you sign up for some additional time and continue the conversation. So again, dude, thank you for coming on, and you are very knowledgeable on this subject, and it's very, very refreshing to talk to you.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate
this
it.
was great.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
gonna
very
hit.
honored to be on. I had a great time, guys.
Hell yeah, I'm gonna hit stop, and we'll stay on for a second.
Okay.